Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The sea wind howled around the towers of Dragonstone, carrying with it the salt and sorrow of a dying age. The last dragons, once the fiery soul of House Targaryen's might, were dwindling, smaller, weaker, more beasts than gods. And in the heart of that storm-lashed isle, a young maester named Orwyn came ashore beneath a sky as gray as the citadel's own stone. He had been sent from Old Town, bearing a letter sealed with the mark of the conclave. His orders were simple, or so they seemed: to serve Princess Rhaella Targaryen as her Maester, and to assist Lord Stefan Baratheon in the king's affairs. Yet hidden beneath the wax and words was another task, written not in ink, but in implication, a mission whispered among the Grey Brothers of the Citadel. Learn what you can, Archmeister Valar had told him before his departure. And remember, some fires must be allowed to die, lest the world burn anew. Orwyn had nodded, though the words troubled him. He had studied dragons since his boyhood, fascinated by their mystery, their bond with the Targaryens, their vanishing magic. Now, the thought of hastening their end gnawed at him like frostbite on the soul. Still, a master served knowledge and realm, not passion and myth. He arrived as a storm broke, rain lashing against the black stone keep carved in the shape of dragons. The portcullis lifted with a groan, and torches flickered in the courtyard. Waiting for him was Serjonos Velaryon, the Castellan, a thin man with pale hair and eyes like cold seawater. "You're the new Maester?" Serjonos asked, voice sharp with doubt. "You'll find no comfort here, Orwyn of Old Town. Dragonstone is a place of ghosts." Orwyn gave a respectful bow. "Then I shall keep them company, sir." That night, as he was led through the echoing halls, Orwyn caught glimpses of dragon bones set into the walls, massive ribs forming archways, skulls staring from alcoves like silent sentinels. The air smelled of ash and secrets. In the great hall, Princess Rhaella awaited him. She was young and kind-eyed, her silver hair bound with a circlet of pearls. At her side stood her husband, Prince Aerys, his beauty marred by restless energy and the faint flicker of madness behind his violet eyes. "Welcome, Maester Orwyn," said Rhaella softly. "Dragonstone is lonely of late. Perhaps you will find a way to make it less so." "I am honored, Princess," Orwyn replied, bowing low. "May my service bring comfort to you and your house." Aerys smiled thinly. "Comfort? We have no need of comfort, Maester. What we need are dragons, strong, fearsome, as in the days of old. Can you summon one from your chains and scrolls?" The jest carried venom. Orwyn bowed again, choosing silence over reply. Later, in his small tower chamber, he unpacked his satchel: quills, ink, parchment, and the true relic of his purpose, a sealed bundle marked with the sigil of the Citadel. Within lay treatises on dragon anatomy, breeding habits, and the accounts of Septon Barth and Archmeister Marwyn, both condemned by the conclave for delving too deeply into the art of dragons. And beneath those scrolls, hidden even from himself until now, was a smaller parchment inscribed in cipher. He hesitated before breaking its seal. The message within was brief, its meaning plain. "Observe, record, do not intervene. The fire must fade." Orwyn's chest tightened. So it was true. The Citadel did not merely study the decline of dragons, they intended it. That night, he could not sleep. The wind outside howled like the cries of the dead, and in the dark he thought he heard the faint, mournful rumble of something vast beneath the castle stones. The dragons that remained were said to dwell in the pit below the mountain, a cavern deep and foul where the last of their kind dwindled in sickness and despair. Come dawn, Orwyn sought permission to see them. Princess Raella granted it, for she too grieved their fading glory. "Tell me if they can be healed," she said, though her tone was heavy with doubt. Guided by a silent keeper with a torch, Orwyn descended into the pit. The air grew thick with heat and stench, the walls damp with soot. Then he saw them. 2 dragons, their wings torn and withered, their scales dulled to gray. One lifted its head, a pitiful thing, eyes sunken and tired. The Maester stepped closer, heart pounding. "Magnificent," he whispered. "Even dying, they are magnificent." "Magnificent!" the keeper rasped. "They are dying, Maester. The fire goes out of them one by one. The eggs won't hatch. They say it's the curse of the gods." "Or the will of men," Orwyn murmured under his breath. That evening, as he recorded his findings, a shadow fell across his table. A cloaked figure stood in the doorway. An older man, his chain gleaming with links of many metals. "Archmaester Vylar?" Orwyn stammered, rising to his feet. Vylar's cold eyes fixed on him. "You will continue your observations in silence, Orwyn. The princess must not suspect. The dragon's passing is the price of progress. Remember that." And then, as silently as he had come, the Archmaester was gone, leaving the scent of parchment and old smoke in his wake. Outside, thunder rolled over the sea. Orwyn stood at the window, staring into the storm. Below, in the pits, a faint roar echoed, a dying sound, or perhaps the birth of something yet unseen. For the first time since leaving Old Town, Maester Orwyn wondered if the citadel truly served knowledge, or only its own kind of power. And far below, in the depths of Dragonstone, a single dragon egg trembled in the dark. Days passed upon Dragonstone, gray and wind-scoured. The sea hurled itself against the cliffs with endless fury, as though the gods themselves sought to batter the island to ruin. Within those walls of black stone, Maester Orwyn began his quiet work. He recorded every observation: the dragons' feeding habits, the brittleness of their scales, the strange, lifeless eggs that gathered dust in the hatching pits. The great creatures were shadows of their ancestors, their breaths feeble, their fire little more than smoke and spark. Yet the more Orwyn studied them, the more his heart ached with wonder. He wrote of one called Morningstar, a pale she-dragon who had not flown in years. Her eyes, milky with age, followed him with eerie intelligence whenever he entered her lair. There was sorrow in her gaze, as though she remembered a sky she would never again command. "Why do you look at me so?" Orwyn whispered once, standing before her. "I did not make your chains." But the dragon only exhaled a thin plume of smoke and lowered her head to the ashes of her nest. Each night, Orwyn sent sealed ravens to Old Town as instructed. Yet with each message, his conscience wavered. He was reporting the slow death of a miracle, and the men he served seemed to welcome it. It was during the 3rd week of his stay that the first sign of danger came. Orwyn was summoned to the chamber of Princess Raella. She sat by the window, sunlight gleaming on her silver hair, a letter trembling in her hands. "From King's Landing," she said quietly. "The king grows unwell. He fears betrayal in every corner. He even suspects the Maesters." Orwyn bowed his head. "Rumor often breeds madness, Princess. His Grace has many burdens." Raella sighed, her gaze drifting toward the distant sea. "He dreams of dragons," she said. "He says they speak to him in the dark, urging him to wake them from stone. But the eggs are cold, master, all of them. I have tried. Oh, I have prayed, but they will not stir." She gestured to a chest by her bedside. Within lay 3 petrified eggs, crimson, black, and gold. Orwyn felt his breath catch. Their beauty was heartbreaking, their colors deep as jewels. "Would you allow me to study them, princess?" he asked softly. "There may yet be truths hidden within their shells." She hesitated, then nodded. "Do what you can, but be careful. My husband must not know. He would see it as mockery that another tends to his dragons when he cannot." That night, Orwyn carried the eggs to his chamber. He examined them by candlelight, tracing the delicate web of scales across their surface. One, the smallest, bore faint cracks, hairline fissures that seemed to shimmer when touched by flame. He leaned closer, whispering words half-remembered from forbidden texts. "Stone may sleep, but fire remembers." A spark flared, brief and weak, before fading into nothing. Yet for that moment, Orwyn could have sworn he heard a faint sound, a heartbeat, slow and steady, echoing from within the egg. He scarcely had time to ponder it before a knock came at his door. "Meister," said a voice, low and grave. It was Ser Jonos Velaryon, the Castellan. His eyes darted toward the eggs. "You meddle with dangerous things. Some of us still remember when the sky burned." "I seek only knowledge," Orwyn replied. Jonos leaned closer. "Knowledge has a price, and there are those who mean to see these creatures gone forever. If you value your life, Maester, burn your notes and speak no more of hatching dragons." He turned and strode away, leaving Orwyn alone with the flickering candlelight and the heavy silence of the eggs. When dawn came, Orwyn sought counsel from Archmeister Valar, but the old man had departed without warning. Only a letter remained, sealed with black wax. Its words were few, but heavy as stone. "The gray ravens move swiftly. Do not stand in their path." The gray ravens. Orwyn had heard the name whispered in Old Town, an unseen fellowship of Maesters, bound by purpose, sworn to rid the world of all that was unnatural. Dragons, sorcery, prophecy. They claimed to serve reason, yet their power rivaled kings. That night, he followed a hunch. Beneath the castle's old library, behind a shelf of mold-eaten tomes, he found a narrow stair curling downward. The air grew colder as he descended, until he reached a small chamber lit by green glassed lanterns. There, a group of men stood in silence, their robes gray, their chains heavy. Upon a stone table lay parchments and vials of strange powders. In the center burned a brazier, its smoke thick and acrid. One of the maesters turned, and Orwyn's blood froze. It was Valar himself. "Ah," the Archmeister said, his tone calm, almost regretful. "You should not have come here, Orwyn." "What is this?" Orwyn demanded. "What have you done to them? The dragons? The eggs?" Valar regarded him with a scholar's pity. "Dragons are not life, but plague. Their magic unbinds the laws of nature. They were the doom of Valyria, and they would be the doom of Westeros too. The realm must be free of them, so that men may rule as men, not as gods." He gestured to the vials. "The powders are mixtures of lead and quicksilver, devised by the Citadel's brightest minds. When fed to the beasts, their fire turns inward. Slowly, their hearts burn to ash." Orwyn staggered back. "You poisoned them." Valar's expression did not waver. "We liberated the realm." The younger Maester's fists clenched. "You speak of liberation, yet you murder what you do not understand." Valar's gaze hardened. "You are loyal to wonder, not to wisdom. That is your failing. Guards moved toward Orwyn, but he turned and fled up the stair before they could seize him. He did not stop until he reached the open air, his lungs filled with the cold breath of the sea. That night, he wrote a letter, not to Old Town, but to someone he had once studied under, a man shunned by the Citadel for his beliefs, Archmaester Marwyn, the mage. "If the dragons die," he wrote, "it is not by fate but by the hands of men. I have proof. Send word or come yourself. There may yet be a way to save one." When he sealed the raven and sent it into the storm, he felt something stir within him, a flicker of courage, faint as the heartbeat he had heard in that egg. Far below, deep in the caverns, the dragon Morningstar lifted her head and uttered a long, shuddering cry. The sound rolled through the stone halls of Dragonstone like thunder, and somewhere in the darkness, one of the eggs shivered again. The raven was gone into the tempest, a black shadow against the lightning-torn sky. Orwyn watched it vanish and wondered if it would ever reach Old Town, or if the gray ravens would strike it from the air before dawn. Sleep eluded him that night. He sat by the window, the dragon eggs laid before him on the table. Their faint glimmer in the candlelight drew his gaze again and again, as if the shells themselves whispered. When he closed his eyes, he saw fire, wings, and the pale eyes of the dying dragon Morningstar. By morning, the castle was uneasy. Rumors whispered through its halls like smoke. A keeper in the dragon pit had been found dead, his face blackened, his eyes boiled within his skull. The guards said he had fallen into the brazier while drunk, but Orwyn knew better. The gray ravens moved swiftly indeed. He went to the pit at first light, under the pretext of continuing his observations. The guards, pale and tight-lipped, let him pass. Within, Morningstar lay still, her vast flank rising shallowly, each breath a wheeze of heat. The smell of blood and ash hung thick in the air. He knelt beside her. "You are dying," he murmured, voice breaking. "And I am meant to let you." Her eye opened, one molten orb fixed upon him. In that gaze, Orwyn felt no accusation, only recognition, as though she saw through him, through the years, through all the deceit of men. He drew forth a flask from his satchel, a clear vial of water from the Citadel's wells. But within, he had hidden something else, a powder of his own devising, drawn from his studies of Valyrian texts, meant not to kill, but to rouse the ember of life. It was folly, perhaps treason, yet he poured it into a bowl of meat and set it before her. The dragon did not move for a long while. Then, with the faintest growl, she ate. The ground shuddered. Steam rose from her nostrils. For an instant, a spark flared in her throat, a true spark, bright as dawn. Orwyn fell to his knees in awe, but then came footsteps. He turned to see Ser Jonas Velaryon standing in the archway, torch in hand, his face drawn and hard. "I told you to stay clear of this, Maester." Orwyn rose swiftly. "She lives. The fire is not gone. It only sleeps. I can save her, Jonas. I swear it." Jonas's eyes flickered to the dragon, to the faint wisp of smoke curling from her mouth. "Save her? You fool. Do you know what they would do to me if they found you here meddling?" "They're poisoning them," Orwyn cried. "The Maesters, the Grey Ravens, Vylar himself. They mean to end the blood of dragons forever." Jonas's expression did not change, but the torch in his hand trembled. "You should leave Dragonstone. Tonight. I cannot. There are eggs that yet stir, and..." The knight seized him by the arm. "You don't understand. I serve the princess, but I have no power to shield you. The Citadel's reach is longer than the Iron Throne's." He released Orwyn and turned away. Do what you will, but if you stay, you'll die here, like her. By the time Orwyn returned to his chambers, the storm had broken again. Rain lashed the windows, and thunder rolled like the roar of giants. He found the eggs as he had left them, yet one now lay cracked. A fissure ran along its shell, thin but deep, glowing faintly red beneath the scales. He touched it, and warmth pulsed through his fingers. Something within was alive. He worked feverishly through the night, drawing diagrams, reading every scrap of Valyrian lore he had gathered. He stoked the hearth, built a circle of heat around the egg, and whispered every ancient word of awakening he knew. When dawn came, the crack widened, a sliver of shell broke away, and a faint sound emerged, a hiss, soft as the sigh of embers. It was then that Princess Rhaella came to him. She entered without warning, her hair unbound, her eyes rimmed red. "The castle is in uproar," she said. "Sir Janos has vanished. The Maesters speak of treachery. What have you done, Orwyn?" He turned the egg toward her. "Your Grace, look." Her breath caught. The faintest movement rippled beneath the shell, and a shimmer of firelight danced across it. "By the gods," she whispered. "It breathes. It lives," he said fervently. "There may yet be hope for your house, for the dragons, for all that was lost." But she stepped back, fear mingling with wonder. "If the Citadel learns of this, they already know," he replied grimly. "Vylar and his gray ravens mean to destroy every last egg before another hatches. They claim to serve reason, but what they serve is power." Rhaella's eyes filled with tears. "My husband speaks of fire and madness. The court mocks him as the Mad Prince, but perhaps he was right to dream. If dragons die, what is left of our blood?" Before Orwyn could answer, a horn sounded from the battlements. Then came the crash of steel, the distant cries of men. "They've come for me," he said, "for the egg." "Then take it," Rhaella said quickly, seizing his hands. "Take it and flee. There is a tunnel beneath the rookery, an old smuggler's path to the sea. Go before they find you." He hesitated. "And you?" She smiled sadly. "A princess may burn, Maester, but what she protects must fly." There was no time for farewell. He wrapped the egg in his cloak, clutching it close as he fled through the winding halls. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind him. Boots, shouts, the clatter of arms. Down through the rookery he ran, past the ravens that screeched in terror, past the tower door that opened onto black rain. The tunnel was narrow and steep, carved through salt rock, its air thick with damp. At its end, he emerged upon a ledge above the sea. The wind nearly tore the cloak from his hands. Below, the waves crashed against jagged stone. He turned once toward the castle. Flames flickered in its highest tower. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing in the window, a woman, her hair silver as moonlight, watching him go. Then a voice called out behind him, "You cannot escape." Valar stood in the tunnel's mouth, his gray robes whipping in the wind, his chain gleaming like a serpent's skin. "Give me the egg, Orwyn," the Archmaester said. "Its death will spare the world another age of fire and war." Orwyn drew himself up, rain streaming from his brow. "No, its life will save it." Valar's eyes narrowed. "Then you are lost." He raised a hand. Behind him, shadows moved, armed men in Maesters gray, their faces hard and cold. Orwyn looked once more at the egg in his arms. The fissure had widened. Heat radiated from within, fierce and wild. Then he stepped back and leapt from the ledge into the sea. The wind tore his scream from his lips. The world turned to roaring water and darkness, and the egg burned in his grasp like a living flame. And far above, in the storm over Dragonstone, lightning split the sky in two. The sea swallowed Maester Orwyn whole. Cold, black, and merciless, it dragged him beneath until the world became a roaring void of salt and shadow. He held the egg tight against his chest, feeling its heat like a heart of living flame. It pulsed, steady and strong, guiding him upward through the darkness. When at last he broke the surface, the storm raged still. The cliffs of Dragonstone loomed behind him, dark as a broken crown. Lightning flared across the sky, and for an instant he saw the castle's towers silhouetted in fire. Then came the thunder, rolling like a god's wrath. He struck out toward a distant smudge of shore, a strip of jagged rocks where the surf shattered white. Every stroke burned his lungs, yet he would not let go of the egg. His chain of Maesters links dragged at his neck like an anchor, but he clung to life with the stubborn will of the desperate. At last, waves hurled him upon the rocks. He crawled forward, coughing brine and blood, the egg still clutched in his arms. Its glow had dimmed, but it was warm still, alive. He lay there for what felt like hours, shivering beneath the rain, until at last the storm began to wane. Gray light seeped through the clouds. When he opened his eyes again, dawn had come, pale and cold. He found shelter in a sea cave carved deep into the cliffs. There he built a small fire, drying his robes, and unwrapped the egg to inspect it. The fissure had widened. A faint hum, barely audible, came from within. He set it near the flames and whispered to it softly, as though to a frightened child. "You are the last," he murmured, "the last of your kind, and I will not let them kill you." He stayed there for a day and a night, nursing his wounds, until hunger forced him to move on. He followed the coast south, walking until his legs ached, always keeping the egg close to his body beneath his cloak. By the second night, he reached a fishing hamlet called Driftmark's End, a cluster of huts clinging to the shoreline. The people eyed him with suspicion, as they did all strangers, but his gray chain bought him a measure of respect. "I was caught in the storm," he told them. "My ship was wrecked." An old fisherman gave him food in a corner of his hearth. Orwyn thanked him and said little more. Yet as he sat by the fire that night, he overheard the whispers, rumors carried by sailors who had come from King's Landing. They spoke of unrest in the court, of King Aerys growing wild and cruel, of whispers that the Targaryen blood was cursed anew. And worse, they said the Citadel had declared the dragons extinct at last. "The last of the beasts dead at Dragonstone," said one man, raising his cup. "Good riddance, I say. The world's safer for it." Orwyn felt his stomach twist. The gray ravens had succeeded, at least in part. Their poison had done its work. Morningstar was gone. The others, too, likely perished in the flames of the storm. But not all was lost. Not yet. That night, when all others slept, Orwyn slipped from the hut and followed the moonlit path down to the shore. The egg glowed faintly in his hands, alive with an inner fire that answered the pull of the moon. He stared out across the dark waves and made his vow. "I will find you safety," he said softly. "I will see your fire rise again, no matter the cost." He made for a ship at dawn, bartering passage across the narrow sea. His plan was simple enough: to reach Pentos, where talk of old Valyrian scholars still lingered, men who might know secrets forbidden in Old Town. Yet, even as he set foot upon the deck, unease crept at his heart. The captain, a lean man with pale eyes, watched him too closely. The crew, silent and grim, bore the marks of soldiers rather than sailors, and once in the captain's cabin, Orwyn saw a letter sealed with wax the color of ash, a seal he knew well. The the citadels. That night, he did not sleep. The waves were calm, the stars veiled by mist, and the ship creaked like a whispering tomb. He kept the egg wrapped beside him, listening to its faint hum. Sometime before dawn, he heard footsteps outside his cabin. Low voices murmured through the door. "He carries it with him," said one. "The Archmaester was right. The egg still lives." "And the order? Sink the ship, no witnesses." Orwyn's heart froze. He moved quickly. He wrapped the egg in his cloak once more and climbed through the narrow porthole, the cold air cutting like knives. He dropped silently into the Black Sea, the chill shocking the breath from his lungs. The ship loomed above, its lanterns bobbing like eyes in the dark. Then came the explosion, sudden, blinding. Fire tore through the hull, and the sea erupted in flame. He was hurled backward by the blast, waves crashing over him. The ship shuddered, split apart, and was gone. When the smoke cleared, Orwyn floated alone amid burning debris. The egg was still in his arms, unharmed. Its glow was brighter now, fierce as a heartbeat. He drifted for hours, until the tide carried him toward a rocky coast. By dawn, he staggered ashore once more, this time upon the beaches of the Stormlands. Exhausted, half mad with hunger and cold, he climbed the cliffs and found himself upon an overgrown path leading toward a ruined watchtower. He sought shelter within, lighting a small fire in the hearth. There, in that lonely ruin, he unwrapped the egg. Its shell had split almost entirely. Beneath the cracks glimmered scales of molten gold. A sound rose, a soft, keening cry, like the wind through glass. The egg pulsed once, twice, and then broke open. From within emerged a creature no larger than a cat, its wings wet and trembling, its eyes bright as molten amber. Steam rose from its tiny nostrils. It looked at Orwyn, blinking slowly, and uttered a soft chirr. He wept then, openly, for the first time in years. "You live," he whispered. "By the Seven, you live." He reached out a trembling hand, and the hatchling climbed upon it, curling close to his chest. Its warmth seeped into him, chasing away the chill of the sea. As dawn broke through the clouds, a single beam of sunlight fell upon the tower, bathing man and dragon in gold. For that brief, perfect moment, the world felt whole again. But far to the west, in Old Town's great high tower, Archmaester Valar stood before the conclave, holding a torn, sea-stained letter in his hands. "He lives," Valar said coldly. "And worse, so does the egg." The bells of the citadel tolled, slow and grim. Ravens took flight into the morning sky, bearing messages to every corner of the realm. The hunt had begun. The ruins of the watchtower became Orwyn's refuge. Broken walls and a roof of half-collapsed slate offered little shelter from the wind. Yet he dared not venture farther while the dragonling was so frail. The creature was a wonder of gold and ash, its wings veined with crimson, its eyes molten with curiosity. When it breathed, a wisp of smoke curled from its nostrils. He named it Emberwing. By day, he hunted small birds with a sling, feeding it the meat torn raw. By night, he read from the damp pages of his salvaged journal, drying the parchment by firelight and recording what he could. The Maester in him could not silence the scholar's need to understand what he had done, what he had saved. Weeks passed in secret. Each sunrise brought new marvels. The hatchling grew swiftly, its scales hardening to a burnished sheen. When it spread its wings, sparks crackled in the air. Once, when startled by a sudden peal of thunder, it loosed a puff of fire no larger than a candle flame. Orwyn laughed aloud at the sight, his heart swelling with a fierce and desperate pride. "You are proof," he whispered to it. Proof that the age of dragons need not end in dust. But joy soon gave way to fear. Smoke on the horizon warned of riders on the coast. Soldiers, perhaps, or worse. The citadel's ravens had surely flown. He began to move at dusk, traveling inland through the forests that covered the Stormland's hills. The little dragon clung to his shoulder, its body hot against his neck, its golden tail coiling beneath his cloak. They came to a village called Crowden, where Orwyn found passage on a merchant's cart bound for the Dornish marches. He hid the hatchling within a chest lined with straw, feeding it bits of dried meat under cover of night. The merchant, a kindly man named Lauren, asked few questions. "You've the look of one fleeing debt or doom," he said with a knowing smile. "It's no matter to me so long as you pay." And so Orwyn traveled south, avoiding the great roads and keeps. Word reached him of strange rumors, the citadel sending gray-cloaked envoys into every holdfast, searching for a thief and a stolen relic, the king's paranoia deepening in the capital, talk that fire dreams plagued the royal court. One night, as they camped by a stream, Orwyn awoke to find the hatchling gone. Panic seized him. He tore through the reeds until he saw a faint glow, a ring of scorched grass near the water's edge. Emberwing crouched there, wings half spread, staring into the reflection of the moon. "Fool creature," Orwyn murmured, gathering it gently. "You must not draw eyes upon us." The dragon looked at him with those bright, intelligent eyes, and for a moment he swore he saw understanding. They reached the borders of Dorne a fortnight later, where red canyons opened to the sun and the air shimmered with heat. Here, in a small monastery dedicated to the Mother, Orwyn sought sanctuary. The Septon, a weary man of middle years, recognized the chain about his neck. "A Maester on pilgrimage?" he asked. "Of a sort," Orwyn replied. "I seek peace and a place to study." The Septon gave him a room, humble but quiet. For months thereafter, Orwyn lived as a ghost among the faithful, tending their sick, copying old texts, and caring for his hidden charge. Emberwing thrived in the southern warmth. Its wings grew long and strong. It began to hunt on its own, slipping into the canyons at dusk and returning before dawn, the scent of smoke on its scales. Yet Orwyn knew the peace could not last. One evening, while gathering herbs beyond the monastery walls, he saw them, 3 riders in gray cloaks approaching along the dusty road. Each bore the mark of the citadel upon his breast. The gray ravens had found him. He ran back to his cell, heart pounding. Emberwing stirred from its nest, sensing his fear. "We must go," Orwyn whispered. "Now." Before the moon had risen, they fled into the desert. Behind them, the bells of the monastery rang, a warning or a death knell. For 3 days they traveled through red wastes and black hills, surviving on rainwater caught in hollows. The riders followed. At night, Orwyn saw their fires burning on the horizon, cold stars upon the earth. On the 4th day, as dawn bled across the sky, the gray ravens caught up to him. He heard their shouts echoing through the canyon before he saw them, 3 figures, cloaked and armed, their chains glinting like steel serpents. "Orwyn of Oldtown," one called. "By the authority of the Conclave, you are charged with treason against the realm and the citadel alike. Surrender the creature, and your death will be swift." He turned to run, but arrows struck the rock beside him. Emberwing shrieked, spreading its wings wide. Heat flared against Orwyn's skin. "Fly!" he cried. With a cry that shook the air, the young dragon leapt skyward. Fire poured from its mouth in a blinding burst, searing through the canyon. The riders reeled, their horses screaming. Orwin seized the chance and fled deeper into the rocks, the smoke choking his breath. When the flames cleared, he was alone. The sound of wings faded into the distance. He called for Emberwing until his voice broke, but only silence answered. At dusk, he stumbled upon a ridge and looked down into the valley below. There, among the stones, he saw one of the gray ravens lying dead, his cloak still smoldering. Of the others, no sign remained. Orwin sank to his knees, exhausted. "You've gone," he whispered. "You've gone to the skies." He watched the horizon until darkness fell. In the far distance, above the desert, a faint light flickered among the clouds, a streak of gold and fire vanishing into the stars. He smiled through his tears. The next morning, he made his way to a hidden port on Dorne's southern coast. There, before taking a ship east, he wrote one final letter. To the Archmaesters of the Citadel, it began, "I name myself no longer your servant. The dragons are not gone, nor shall they ever be, for their fire lives in the hearts of those who still remember wonder. You may silence my name, but you will never silence the wind that bears their wings." He sealed the letter and gave it to a sailor bound for Old Town, knowing well what fate awaited him if the gray ravens ever caught him again. As his ship set sail, he looked west one last time. Over the desert, the sky burned with the light of the setting sun, gold and crimson, like the scales of a dragon. And for a heartbeat, Orwin thought he saw it there, far above the clouds, a flash of wings, a trail of fire. Emberwing, grown strong, flying free. He bowed his head and smiled. The hunt would never end, nor would the danger, but the world had changed. The age of dragons was not dead. It was waiting for the fire to rise again. Across the narrow sea, the world changed. The winds of Essos were softer than those of Westeros, yet they carried whispers no less cruel. Orwin came ashore at Lys beneath a blood-red dawn, cloaked in the guise of a wandering healer. His shipmates left him upon the docks without farewell. There was something in his eyes, they said, that spoke of ghosts. He kept to the lesser ports, always watching the sky. Days turned into months as he wandered eastward through the free cities, following rumor and shadow. Merchants spoke of a golden beast seen over the stepstones. Sailors swore of fire on the water. Once, in the markets of Volantis, he caught sight of a tattered banner, a red three-headed dragon, borne by a boy who claimed descent from lost Valyria. But Orwin knew the truth. The fire he sought was not some pretender's sigil. It lived, it flew, it remembered him. Each night, when sleep eluded him, he wrote in his journals. His ink-stained fingers trembled as he traced the story of the Maesters' betrayal, the last egg, the flight through storm and sea. He wrote so that history would not die in silence. "They will call me heretic," he murmured, "but let them. Truth burns brighter than fear." In Lys he found passage northward, toward Pentos. There he met men who trafficked in secrets, sorcerers, alchemists, and one Maester gone rogue who whispered of strange fires stirring once more in the east. "A dragon?" The man laughed, his voice cracked and dry. "They are gone, old fool, but something like them stirs beyond the Bone Mountains. The world quickens again." Orwin left him with a heavy heart. The gray ravens would be searching still, hunting the phantom of his name. In every port, he saw their eyes in the crowd. Cold, gray, patient. They would not rest until he and the creature were ash. One night, while resting in a tavern by the Pentoshi harbor, a stranger came to him. A woman cloaked in black, her hair the color of smoke. She sat beside him uninvited, her voice low and steady. "You are far from home, Maester." "I am no longer of the Citadel," he replied. "So I've heard," she said. "The gray ravens whisper your name as a curse. They say you stole something from them, a beast born of fire." Orwyn's heart tightened. "And if I did?" The woman smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we are kin, you and I. My masters once bred dragons too, though we called them by other names. The fire obeys none but those who dare." From within her cloak, she drew a small vial. Its contents shimmered gold like liquid sunlight. "Take this," she said. "It is blood mixed with flame. In the East, they call it dragon seed. It answers to its own kind. Burn it, and what belongs to you will find you." Before he could speak, she was gone, vanished into the mist like a shadow at dawn. Orwyn left Pentos within the week. His steps carried him to the desolate ruins of Valeria's western edge, where the earth still steamed and the air stank of brimstone. There, in the shadow of broken towers, he built a small camp. He had aged 10 years since Dragonstone, his beard now streaked with white, his chain dulled by salt and sun. But his purpose burned undimmed. On the 4th night, beneath a moon shrouded by smoke, he poured the golden liquid upon the stones and set it alight. The fire leapt high, hissing, hungry. He whispered the old Valyrian words, the ones he had read in secret beneath the Citadel's vaults. "Come to me, child of flame. Come to me, my hope." For hours nothing stirred but the wind. The fire sank to embers. He felt the old despair creep in, familiar, heavy as ash. Then the ground trembled. A cry split the air, wild and fierce. The heat doubled. From the clouds above came a flash of gold and red, swift as lightning. Wings blotted out the moon. Ember Wing. It descended in a storm of wind and sand, its body vast now, shining like the sun on molten metal. It landed with a thunderous crack, folding its wings. Orwyn fell to his knees, tears burning his eyes. "You live," he whispered. "By all the gods, you live." The dragon lowered its head until its snout was level with him. Its breath washed over him, hot as a forge. In its eyes, he saw the same fierce intelligence he had glimpsed in the hatchling long ago. Recognition. He reached out, laying his trembling hand upon the scales. "Forgive me," he said. "I let you fly alone." Emberwing rumbled, a sound like distant thunder. Then, slowly, it unfurled its wings and rose. Fire shimmered across its back, and when it took to the sky again, Orwyn felt the wind of its passing like a benediction. He knew it could not stay. A creature such as this could never belong to one man's keeping. But its survival meant the Maesters' design had failed. The world's fire would not be extinguished. He remained in the ruins for a time, recording what he had seen, the truth of it all. Yet one evening, while he wrote by lantern light, he heard a noise beyond the camp, a soft rustle, followed by a voice. "Maester Orwyn." Archmaester Valar stood at the edge of the firelight, his gray cloak untouched by dust, his eyes as cold as ever. Behind him were 4 men, their chains glinting faintly. "It is over," Valar said. "The creature has been seen. The Conclave will not permit its kind to return. You should not have defied us." Orwyn rose slowly. "You call yourselves keepers of wisdom, yet you fear knowledge that breathes. You murder what you cannot master." "Order must survive," Valar replied. "If dragons live, kings will dream of conquest again. Fire consumes, and the world burns with it." "Then let it burn," Orwyn said quietly. "Better a world of flame than one of silence." Valar's expression did not change. "You were once a man of learning. Now you are a fanatic. "Farewell, Orwyn." He raised a small glass sphere from within his sleeve, no larger than an apple. A faint green light pulsed within. Wildfire. Orwyn had seconds to act. He flung his lantern at Vaylor's feet. Flame erupted, the night exploding into chaos. The air turned to smoke and light. He fled through the ruins, coughing, blinded by sparks. Behind him, the sphere burst, and the valley lit as bright as dawn. When the fire died, the ruins were silent. The Maesters were gone, consumed in their own design. Of Vylar, no trace remained. Orwyn lived, though barely. He crawled from the wreckage, his robes charred, his lungs seared. Above him, the sky burned gold. Emberwing circled once more, wheeling high, its cry echoing across the dead land. He watched until his strength failed. "Live," he whispered. "Live for both of us." The dragon's shadow swept over him, vast and silent, and then it was gone, rising eastward toward the dawn. Long after, travelers in Essos would speak of a golden flame that haunted the skies, and of a Maester's bones found amid the ruins, clutching a chain melted to bright silver. And in Old Town, the conclave sealed its records and spoke no more of dragons. But beneath the citadel, in vaults older than memory, one name remained burned into parchment: Orwyn the Faithless. Yet those who still dreamed of wonder gave him another name: Orwyn Fireborn, the man who kept the flame. Years passed, and the tale of Orwyn the Faithless became no more than a rumor whispered among Maesters and smugglers, sailors and sellswords. Some said he had died in Valyria's ruin. Others that he had fled east to join red priests who worshipped flame. But those who had once walked the paths of learning, who had read his forbidden journals in the citadel's locked vaults, knew a grimmer truth, that his heresy had lived on. For far beyond the smoking sea, beyond the ruins of old Valyria, the dragon Emberwing soared alone across the skies of Essos. It hunted above the deserts of the Red Waste, and its shadow fell upon caravans that vanished without trace. Shepherds spoke of a golden fire that came in the night and left only glass where sand had been. The Dothraki named it the Sun Eater, and would not ride in the lands it claimed. And somewhere, far from prying eyes, a new fire stirred. In a hidden valley east of Meereen, among cliffs scorched black by time, a cave yawned deep into the mountain's heart. There, Emberwing made its lair. No man or beast approached without dread, for the very air shimmered with heat. Deep within that hollow of stone and fire, upon a bed of ash and bone, the dragon guarded something precious: 3 eggs, pale gold and streaked with crimson. Orwyn's legacy had not died with him. Yet even as new life pulsed beneath those shells, the world beyond turned once more toward war. In Westeros, the madness of King Aerys deepened. Whispers of wildfire stockpiled beneath the Red Keep reached the citadel, and the conclave, fearing the return of dragons in spirit if not in flesh, revived the secret order that Orwyn had defied: the Grey Ravens. Archmaester Belden, Vaylor's former pupil, took command of the Brotherhood. His hair was white, his voice soft, but his will was iron. "If fire rises once," he said to the gathered Maesters, "it will rise again. The Targaryens are broken, but their poison remains. The world must be cleansed." And so the Grey Ravens flew east. Their ships bore no banners, only the gray flags of scholars. From Old Town to Pentos, from Pentos to Korth, they followed rumor and trace, always a step behind the truth. The people they questioned spoke of strange things: of villages found burned without cause, of shepherds vanishing, of a mountain that glowed at night like a forge. Among them was a younger man named Maester Corin, who had once studied Orwyn's writings in secret. He read the accounts of dragons not as threats, but as wonders, and though he sailed with Belden, his heart wavered. "Perhaps the world needs its fire," he once said softly. Belden gave him a long, hard look. "Then may you burn in it, boy, if you are so eager to see its light." At last they reached the shadow of the mountains east of Slaver's Bay. Their guides would go no farther. "The air there kills," said one, crossing himself. "The fire sleeps beneath the stone." Belden smiled thinly. "Then we shall wake it." They climbed for days, through canyons filled with the bones of beasts too large to name. The ground trembled now and again, and the scent of brimstone clung to every gust of wind. When at last they reached the mouth of the cave, Corin felt his heart falter. The walls were slick with soot, the rocks scorched as if by ancient flame. "Do you feel it?" Belden whispered, eyes shining with feverish purpose. "This is where he died, Orwyn's tomb, and perhaps his sin." They entered. The heat was suffocating. The deeper they went, the stronger it grew, until their lanterns burned blue and the air shimmered like a veil. Then they came upon it, a vast cavern lit by rivers of molten stone. Upon a mound of blackened earth lay the dragon, its golden wings folded, its chest rising with slow, thunderous breaths. "By the gods," Corin breathed. "It's real." Belden stepped forward, awe warring with terror. "So the traitor's folly has endured. Then we must finish what he could not." He raised a flask of quicksilver oil, the weapon of the Grey Ravens, crafted to choke the lungs and poison flame. One breath, and its fire dies forever. Corin hesitated. He saw the creature's eyes open, two burning suns that fixed upon them, not with malice, but with weary knowing. In that moment he thought of Orwyn's words, written years before. The dragons are not beasts, but the memory of the world's beginning. He struck Belden's arm aside. The flask shattered on the stones. "You would kill what is wonder," Corin shouted. Belden's face twisted with fury. "Then you are his heir after all." He drew a knife from his belt and lunged. They struggled beside the pool of molten stone, the air thick with heat and ash. The knife flashed, catching Corin's arm. Pain seared through him. He shoved Belden back, the old man stumbling toward the edge. Then the dragon moved. Emberwing rose to its full height, wings unfurling like sheets of gold. The cavern filled with a sound beyond thunder, the roar of the world's first fire. Belden screamed once before the flame took him. The others fled into the dark, their chains glowing red before they fell. When silence returned, Corin lay upon the ground, bleeding and dazed. The dragon loomed above him, its eyes vast and bright. Slowly, it lowered its head until its breath washed over him like a wind of summer. He thought it might kill him. Instead, it turned away, curling once more upon the mound of earth. Beneath its wings, the 3 eggs pulsed with light. Corin understood then. This was not an ending, but a beginning. The fire had returned to the world, and no man could unmake it. He crawled from the cave, the mountains blazing behind him. Days later, he stumbled into a village near the Skahazadan, fevered and half-mad, speaking of dragons and fire. They took him for a prophet of R'hllor and called him the Herald of Flame. In the west, the conclave received no word from Belden's expedition. The Grey Ravens were presumed lost. The records were sealed once more, and the Maesters whispered that the world had been spared. But far across the sea, a young man in the red wastes of Essos gazed upon the sky and saw a shadow pass before the sun, vast, golden, and glorious. He felt the heat on his face and smiled, though he did not know why, for the fire that men sought to kill had only gone to ground, and deep in the burning lands, Emberwing's cry split the heavens, a herald of the age to come. Years later, long after the doom had ceased to steam, and the last of Orwyn's name had been stricken from the Citadel's rolls, tales of fire once more began to creep across the eastern lands. In the markets of Korth, merchants spoke of a light seen over the horizon, bright enough to shame the morning star. In the shadowed taverns of Meereen, sailors whispered of a golden shadow soaring above the sea, its reflection gleaming upon the waves. Most dismissed such stories as drunken talk, but others, scholars, wanderers, red priests, listened with careful ears. The fire was stirring again, and those who sought to master it began to move their pieces upon the board. Far to the north of those burning lands, in the marble halls of Norvos, a man cloaked in gray arrived by night. His beard was white, his chain dulled by age, yet his step was steady. He gave no name at first, only a signet ring bearing the sigil of the Citadel. The guards let him pass. He was Master Corin, older now, scarred and half lame from the wounds of the cave. He had fled the mountains with Emberwing's fire still blazing behind him, and had lived for years as a ghost among the free cities. But now, with his strength waning, he sought to record what he knew before time claimed him as it had claimed Orwyn. In Norvos, he found a quiet patron, a merchant of learning named Narok, who prized knowledge above life. "Write your truth," the man said, "and I shall see it kept safe." And so Corin began his chronicle, the story of the dragon's fall, the Maesters' treachery, and the fire that would not die. Yet even as his quill scratched the parchment, danger crept nearer. The Citadel had not forgotten him. One night he was awoken by the cry of a raven outside his window. Upon its leg hung a strip of parchment, sealed in gray wax. "The flame must be buried," it read. "You are the last ember. Be silent or be extinguished." He burned the message and pressed on. As weeks passed, rumors reached Norvos that the Grey Ravens had returned, not as maesters, but as assassins. Their order had learned from its failures. They now worked in shadow, killing any who spoke the forbidden word, dragon. Corin knew they would come for him, yet his heart was no longer filled with fear, but with purpose. He had seen the creature's eyes, the light within its wings, the living truth that men had tried to smother. "Let them come," he murmured to the flame in his hearth. "I will not go quietly." The knock came on the 7th night of the new moon. 3 men entered the chamber, cloaked in gray, their chains blackened to hide the gleam. "Maester Corin," said the first, his voice calm as still water, "you have written heresy." "I have written history," Corin replied. "You have kept alive a lie that should have died with your master Orwyn." Corin rose, leaning on his staff. "Then kill me, as you killed him. But know this, fire cannot be slain. It waits. It grows." The eldest of the assassins sighed. "So be it." They moved swiftly, but Corin had been ready. He flung the contents of a nearby brazier into their faces. Flames leapt up, the oil hissing as it caught the cloaks of his attackers. In the confusion, he seized his manuscripts and fled through the servants' passage into the night. He ran until his breath came ragged, the city bells tolling behind him. At the river's edge, he found a boatman dozing by his skiff. "South," Corin gasped, "to the Shadowlands, as far as your courage carries." The man, seeing the silver chain about his neck, hesitated only a moment before nodding. For weeks they followed the coasts, past Volantis, past the ruins of Valyria that still smoked in the sea until the air grew heavy and red. There, the boatman refused to go farther. "No man sails beyond these waters," he said, trembling. "Not for gold, not for gods." Corin left him with coin enough to buy 10 lives and continued alone in a small fishing boat. The wind guided him eastward, and one night he saw it, a light, vast and golden, blazing upon the horizon. He rowed toward it as a man possessed. When dawn came, he beheld a sight that stole his breath. Before him rose a mountain of black stone, its peak wreathed in smoke, and circling above it was Emberwing. The dragon had grown beyond imagining, vast as a fortress, its wings the color of dawn. It wheeled once over the sea before descending to the mountain's flank. Corin followed, his heart hammering with awe and terror. He climbed the narrow path, the air thick with heat. The rocks beneath his hands were glassy and smooth, melted by fire. When he reached the summit, he found a wide ledge overlooking a crater filled with molten stone. There, upon a ridge of obsidian, lay Emberwing, and beside it, 3 creatures smaller but fierce, their scales red, gold, and black. The eggs had hatched. Corin fell to his knees. "By the gods, Orwyn's dream lives." The dragon lifted its head, smoke curling from its nostrils. In its gaze, Corin saw not malice, but memory, the same look it had given him years ago, when it spared his life. It recognized him. He bowed low. "I have carried your story through fire and blood. Now it is yours to carry onward." The creature's breath rumbled in answer, and the young dragons echoed it, their cries blending with the wind. Firelight bathed the mountain, casting golden reflections over the sea. Corin smiled through his tears. "Go," he whispered. "Let the world remember." And Emberwing rose, spreading its wings wide. The young ones followed, 3 streaks of flame leaping into the dawn. Their cries shook the very sky, and the sun broke through the smoke like a crown of fire. When the Maesters of Old Town looked to the east that morning, some swore they saw a blaze upon the horizon, 4 shapes flying in formation, bright as stars. The conclave dismissed it as madness, but deep within the vaults, the Grey brothers trembled. The Grey ravens vanished soon after. Some said they had sailed east and never returned. Others claimed the dragons hunted them, burning their ships to cinders. And though Corin's name was never spoken in the citadel again, fragments of his writings survived, pages found years later in the library of a prince who dreamed of dragons. They spoke of fire's rebirth, of the folly of men who thought to chain the elements, and of one truth above all. So long as the sky endures, the flame will return. In the shadow of that eastern mountain, the 4 dragons soared high into the clouds, their roars carrying across the endless sea, heralding the dawn of a world reborn in fire. The years rolled onward like a slow tide, and the fire of the east became the whispers of the west. In Old Town, where the high tower rose pale against the sea, the Maesters once again spoke of order, of balance, of the folly of magic. Yet beneath their calm words lay unease. Too many reports drifted across the narrow sea, ships lost amid storms of unnatural lightning, villages found burned to glass, caravans that vanished beneath skies streaked with gold. In the shadows of the citadel, the Grey brothers gathered once more. The Grey ravens were gone, but their creed had not perished. Archmaester Theodan, gaunt and sharp-eyed, presided over them now. He was younger than Valar or Belden had been, yet colder still, for he believed utterly that knowledge alone should rule the world. Fire is disorder, he told his students. It destroys, and through destruction breeds kings, priests, and madmen. Our task is to keep the world still. Stillness was his god, yet even Theodan could not deny the truth that crept from the east. One night, as he studied by candlelight, a raven struck his window, half burned, its feathers smoldering, its message sealed with wax melted by heat. "They fly." Those 2 words shook him more than any prophecy. He summoned his closest apprentices. "If dragons live, then all we have built will crumble. The Iron Throne will rise again in madness, the Red Priests will swarm, and men will forget reason for worship. The fire must be drowned in shadow." So he began his own design, a plan greater and darker than any of the gray ravens before him. He would not merely slay the beasts, he would erase their memory from the hearts of men. He dispatched agents across the free cities under guise of merchants and scholars, bearing chains of many metals, their minds sharpened to cold purpose. And in hidden chambers, he began the crafting of a new art, ink that faded with heat, parchments that burned without flame, poisons that turned dragonfire to smoke. But far away, beyond the world men knew, the dragons were changing. In the heart of that black mountain where Emberwing had made her lair, the 4 dragons grew to terrible strength. The eldest, gold as dawn, was called Orlis. The second, red as blood, Vara. The black one, fiercest of all, Nyrax. And last, the smallest, pale and fleet, Seren, whose eyes shone like the moon on water. Under Emberwing's watch, they hunted the great beasts of the steppe and fought among themselves beneath the burning sun. The mountain trembled with their fury, and when night fell, their roars rolled like thunder across the deserts. The tribes who dwelt nearby began to worship them. They built fires on the ridges and offered gifts of gold and flesh. They called Emberwing Mother of Flame and painted her children upon their tents. Word of their growing might spread through caravans and sailors until even the cities of the west began to tremble at the thought. But Emberwing herself was not blind to men's envy. She had lived through the treachery of Maesters, had seen the poison in their hands. In her vast mind burned both memory and warning. The fire of the world was not yet ready to return to men, for men would only twist it. So she waited, watching, guarding the young. Then, one year as the sun dipped crimson over the wastes, riders came from the west, gray-cloaked, bearing no banners. They were the first of Theoden's hunters, 12 in all, Maesters turned soldiers, their chains reforged into whips and daggers. At their head rode a woman named Myril, once a healer of Old Town, now Theoden's hand. She had studied every record of dragon lore and every mistake the gray ravens had made. She knew where the others had failed and how to succeed. Her host crossed the desert in silence, guided by smoke seen from afar. They reached the foothills of the mountain as dusk fell. "Here," she said, dismounting, "here the world begins again, or ends." The hunters waited for night, then crept into the valley, bearing vials of quicksilver and nets of chain soaked in black oil. Yet the air itself betrayed them. Heat shimmered on the stones, the scent of sulfur filled their lungs, and beneath their feet the ground trembled. A single roar split the sky. Emberwing descended like a comet, her wings tearing the air, her fire sweeping across the ridge. In a heartbeat, half the hunters were ash. Myril alone stood her ground, raising a rod of obsidian capped with a shard of glass. Light flared from its tip, a pale, cold fire. The dragon's flame struck it and scattered. Emberwing reared back with a cry of rage. "Beast!" Myril shouted over the storm of heat. "Your age is done. The world is for men now." But as she spoke, a shadow fell over her. Orlis, the golden sun, swooped from above, jaws wide. Muriel struck once with her rod, the light bursting forth. The dragon shrieked, half blinded, yet its claws found her. The two tumbled together into the fire. When dawn came, nothing remained but glass. Of the 12 hunters, only 2 escaped, crawling half mad from the sands. They carried with them tales of horror and light, of a mountain that burned from within, of 4 dragons that rose against them, and of a queen of gold who made the sky her throne. They returned to Old Town, broken and blackened, and laid their tale before Archmaester Theodan. He listened without speaking, his fingers pressed together. When the last of their words faded, he rose. "Then we are too late," he said. "Fire has found its voice again. The only weapon left to us is silence." And so he gave his final command. All records of dragons beyond Valyria were to be destroyed. All maps of the eastern mountains burned, the names Orwyn, Corrin, and Emberwing erased from every text. "Let the next age forget," he said. "Let them dream only of ruin, so they will never seek flame again." And so it was done. The fires of the east still burned, unseen by men. Theodan's decree spread across the citadel, binding every Maester in silence. Those who questioned vanished, and those who remembered spoke only in riddles. Yet the sea cannot unmake its own waves, nor can man unwrite the sky. In the far east, where mountains kiss the sun, 4 dragons flew together in golden light, their roars rolling across the horizon. And though men called them myth, though the citadel named them dream, their fire yet lingered, waiting for the day when, once more, the blood of dragons would walk the earth. The age of silence endured for half a century. Across the citadels and courts of Westeros, the very word dragon became little more than legend, uttered by singers and fools. The Maesters had done their work well. Every record, every parchment that spoke of Orwyn's defiance or Emberwing's brood had been purged. Only ashes and half-remembered songs remained. But ashes, as the wise sometimes say, are the soil in which fire sleeps. Beyond the narrow sea, the children of Emberwing grew. The deserts of Essos were too small to contain them, so they ranged farther east, where mountains rose like teeth from the earth and rivers shone red under the sun. There they found valleys untouched by men, where wild herds thundered through the plains and forests burned in the breath of their flight. Orlys, the Golden, became the mightiest of the brood, a creature vast enough to blot the sun. Vara, red and proud, ruled the southern skies. Nyrax, black and cruel, the northern wastes, and Saren, smallest and swiftest, kept to the sea, her wings scattering storms in her wake. Together, they were the children of fire, and men of the east began to worship them as gods reborn. Temples rose in their honor. Gold and slaves were offered to appease them. But dragons have no gods, and no need of worship. When the offerings ceased to please them, fire followed, cities fell, kingdoms vanished, and the deserts grew wider each year. From these ruins, a prophet arose, a man who claimed to dream in flame. He called himself the voice of Emberwing and preached that the dragons were not destroyers, but judges sent to cleanse the world of corruption. His followers gathered in thousands, carrying banners of gold and black. They named themselves the Children of the Dawn and marched westward, vowing to bring the fire back to the lands that had denied it. And in Old Town, Archmaester Theodan, ancient now, his flesh shriveled to parchment, received word of this rising faith. "They use her name," he said, his voice rasping like dry leaves. "Emberwing, the heretic's creature. They make of it a god." His apprentice, Maester Pattion, bowed his head. "The people believe it brings justice, Archmaester. They say the dragons burn only the wicked." Theodan's eyes gleamed like iron. "Fire judges nothing, it only consumes." He coughed, his body frail but his mind as sharp as ever. "Summon the conclave. If flame rises again, we shall answer it not with steel, but with truth. The age of dragons will not return while breath remains in me." Yet truth, as ever, proved a blade with two edges. For among the Maesters gathered in the conclave was one who did not belong, a quiet young scholar with hair pale as sand and eyes of molten gold. He wore a gray robe like the rest, but beneath his collar, faint and hidden, lay a small scar shaped like a talon. His name was Maester Alaric, or so he claimed. In truth, he was something else. He had been found as an infant upon the coast of Volantis, wrapped in blackened cloth that smelled faintly of smoke. The fisherfolk who took him in said he never cried when touched by fire. When grown, he came to Old Town to study, and there he excelled beyond his peers. He could read the lost tongues of Valyria as easily as the common speech, and when he walked the Citadel's halls, candles burned brighter at his passing. Now, as he listened to Theodan's decree, to burn all traces of the Eastern fire cults, to erase even the name of Emberwing from history, something within him stirred. That night, he returned to his cell and unwrapped a small bundle kept hidden beneath his cot. Inside lay a sliver of obsidian etched with Valyrian runes, the same sigil that had marked Orwyn's forbidden writings generations before. He traced the symbol with his finger, and warmth pulsed through it, faint but alive. In his dreams that night, he saw a mountain wreathed in fire and 4 shadows circling the sun. One voice rose above the roar of wings, a voice both ancient and familiar. "Child of ash, the world forgets, but blood remembers." He awoke at dawn, his breath cold and his purpose clear. The following week, a fire broke out in the Citadel's lower vaults. The flames spread with unnatural speed, devouring shelves of parchment and crumbling tomes. The Maesters battled the blaze for 2 days before quelling it, but by then much was lost, including the sealed histories of Orwyn and the Grey Ravens. Theodan raged, accusing his apprentices of negligence, yet suspicion turned inward soon enough. Among the ashes, they found fragments of Valyrian script, pages that should never have existed, and of Maester Alaric there was no trace. Some said he perished in the flames. Others whispered he had fled across the sea, drawn by dreams of gold and fire. Both were true in their way. Alaric's ship crossed the narrow sea under a false banner, carrying little but his chain, his obsidian shard, and the fire that haunted his veins. He traveled east through Pentos, then farther still, until the cities thinned and the sands turned red beneath the sun. Each night the same dream returned: wings, fire, and a voice calling his name. At last, after months of wandering, he reached a place that seemed older than the world itself, a mountain of black stone rising solitary above a sea of dust. Smoke curled from its peak. He climbed until his feet bled and the air grew hot enough to sear the lungs. When he reached the summit, he found a vast plain of obsidian, smooth as glass. And there, standing upon it, 4 shadows moved through the haze. The dragons. Orlys, golden and terrible. Vara, red as fresh blood. Nyrax, black as midnight. And Seren, pale as a dying moon. Above them, on a ledge of stone, rested the oldest, Emberwing herself, her scales dulled by time, but her eyes bright as molten gold. Alaric fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the sight. The air quivered with heat and power. Emberwing lowered her head, and her gaze met his. "You are come at last." Her voice filled his mind, vast and echoing. The blood endures. Tears streamed down his face. "Why me?" he whispered. "I am no king, no dragon lord." "You are what remains," the dragon answered. "The seed that outlived the flame. The fire of men and dragons was never meant to die. It sleeps in the blood, waiting for the heart to wake it." He understood then. He was of Orwyn's line, not by name or birth, but by fate. The fire had chosen him. When he rose, the dragons did not flee. Orlys bent its head. Seren circled above. Emberwing's breath touched his face, and for the first time, the heat did not burn. It welcomed him. That night, under a sky torn with lightning, the mountain blazed anew. Witnesses far to the west spoke of fire blooming on the horizon, and of a single figure standing amid it, arms raised to the heavens. When dawn came, the mountain was silent. But those who traveled near swore they saw 5 shapes in the sky now. Not 4. 5 dragons flying toward the rising sun, one smaller than the rest, its scales gleaming silver and gold. The age of silence had ended. The fire had found its heir. The tale of Alaric the Fireborn, though the citadel would deny it until the end of its days, spread first as a murmur and then as a storm. Sailors whispered that a man had been seen walking upon a sea of molten rock. Shepherds claimed that the stars had fallen to earth in the form of 5 blazing wings. And in the east, where the red deserts met the mountains of shadow, tribes spoke of a stranger who commanded dragons with a word. But in Old Town, the truth was buried as swiftly as it was spoken. Archmeister Theodan, now near death, summoned his apprentices and issued one final decree. "Erase the name Alaric," he rasped, his lungs rattling with age. "If dragons live, then knowledge itself is in peril. Better the world blind than burning." When he died that winter, the bells of the citadel tolled not in mourning, but in fear. The gray ravens rose again under a new master, Archmaester Renard, who had once been Theodan's scribe and knew his mind as few others did. Renard was no zealot. His cruelty was colder, quieter. "Men do not fear fire," he said to the conclave, "until it reaches their doors. We will remind them that dragons are death, not wonder." And so began the final war of silence. Across the free cities, the gray ravens wove their web. They poisoned lore masters who spoke of flame, burned libraries that held Valyrian relics, and sent spies into the temples of the children of the dawn. Yet their reach, though vast, could not cross the deserts where Alaric and the brood of Emberwing had made their home. In that wasteland of ash and wind, the 5 dragons ruled the skies. The land itself changed beneath them, rivers carved by fire, forests born from ash. Men who had once feared them now built villages beneath their shadow, living as servants of flame. Alaric dwelt among these tribes not as a god, but as a teacher. He was not young, nor yet old. His face was pale and marked by heat, his eyes gold like the dragons he had come to love. His voice, when he spoke, carried power, not the fury of kings, but the calm certainty of fire. The Masters would have the world chained to their books, he told his followers. But knowledge is not meant to bind, it is meant to burn. Each year, new tribes joined them. The faith of the dawn spread westward again, carried by merchants and pilgrims. It reached as far as Korth, where the pureborn trembled behind their pearl gates, and to Volantis, where red priests declared the stranger from the wastes to be the chosen of R'hllor. And though Alaric disclaimed any crown, His name became legend. Yet even legends cast shadows. In the citadel, Archmeister Renard watched the spread of these rumors and saw in them the death of his order's dominion. "If we cannot slay the flame," he said, "we must smother it." He gathered the remnants of the gray ravens and forged them anew, not as Maesters, but as hunters of heresy. They would cross the sea, bearing weapons crafted from Valyrian steel tempered in poison. Their aim was not to fight dragons. They had no illusions of surviving such madness, but to strike at the heart that commanded them. Alaric. The hunters sailed under the guise of traders carrying silver and grain. They landed upon the coasts of the Red Desert at dusk, when the air shimmered with heat and the mountains glowed like embers. They came upon Alaric's village unguarded, its people tending fires as the sun dipped low. The slaughter was swift. By the time the first dragon's roar split the night, 100 were dead. Flames poured from the cliffs, and shadows took flight against the stars. Orlys struck first, golden and terrible, scattering the attackers with a single sweep of his wings. But the hunters had come prepared. They loosed bolts tipped with dark glass, filled with a venom that burned not the flesh, but the soul. One struck Orlys in the breast. The great dragon screamed, a sound that cracked the mountains and fell like a dying sun upon the plain. When Alaric reached him, the air was thick with smoke and sorrow. He laid a hand upon the creature's head, tears streaking the soot from his face. "Forgive me," he whispered. The dying dragon's eye opened once more. "The fire endures," it seemed to say, and then it went still. In the fury that followed, the hunters were annihilated. The desert burned for 3 days and nights. Its sands turned to glass. The surviving dragons, Vara, Nyrax, Seren, and Emberwing herself, circled above the pyres, their roars echoing through eternity. But Alaric did not join them. He stood amidst the ruin, his heart hollow, and looked to the west. "They will never stop," he said to the wind. "As long as men fear fire, they will seek to end it. So long as fire lives, it will answer." He gathered what followers remained, the children and elders, the keepers of the flame, and led them away from the ashes. They traveled east, beyond the burning mountain, to lands no map had ever named. There, among the canyons of stone and rivers of fire, they built a city, the first and last of its kind. They called it Orion, after the lost city of Valyria, and its walls gleamed red in the light of dragonfire. The dragons roosted upon its towers, guarding it as if it were their own brood. Within, Alaric wrote his final testament, the Book of the Unquenched Flame. He wrote not as a conqueror nor a prophet, but as a man who had seen both knowledge and faith twisted into chains. "Fire," he wrote, "is not to rule nor to serve. It is the breath of creation, the proof that the world yet dreams." When his words were done, he sealed the book in obsidian and gave it to Seren, the smallest and swiftest of the dragons. "Fly," he told her. "Carry this westward to the lands of men. Let them forget my name, but not the truth." And she did. For 3 days Seren flew over sea and storm, her wings leaving trails of silver flame. On the 4th, she vanished beyond the horizon, lost to the mists of time. In the centuries that followed, the city of Orion faded into legend. Travelers spoke of a golden city glimpsed in the heat of the desert, of dragons that soared above the clouds, unseen but felt in every sunrise. And in Old Town, deep beneath the citadel, a single black book was said to lie hidden in the oldest vault, a relic of unknown hand, its pages untouched by age. No maester dared read it, for upon its cover was carved a single word in Valyrian runes: fire. Thus the flame endured, sleeping once more in ink and blood, waiting for the world to remember that dragons do not die, they wait. Centuries passed, and kingdoms rose and fell like waves upon the shore. The Targaryens came from the smoking ruins of Valyria, bearing dragons of their own, and the Maesters of Old Town looked upon them with quiet horror. They spoke nothing of Orwyn or Alaric or Emberwing, for those names were dust, buried beneath the weight of their own deceit. Yet the fire they had sought to smother had only gone to ground, waiting for the breath of time to waken it again. In the halls of the Red Keep, where the Iron Throne glimmered like the fangs of some slumbering beast, the last of the dragons died, thin, crippled things, more lizard than legend. The Maesters said it was nature's will, that dragons were not meant for the world of men, and so their bones were laid beneath the castle, their skulls mounted as trophies upon the walls. But in the citadel, where the Grey brothers counted their victories in silence, one among them found something that should not have been. Maester Liren was not yet 30, but already his chain hung heavy with links of gold, silver, and Valyrian steel. He was a curious soul, restless and brave, too bold for his own safety. While copying old ledgers in the lowest vaults, he discovered a sealed chest hidden behind shelves of dust and decay. Its lock bore no key, only a sigil worn near to nothing, an ancient rune for flame. He should have brought it to the Archmaesters. Instead, he broke it open. Inside lay a single book, bound in black glass and sealed with a strip of gold. Upon its cover, written in faded Valyrian, was one word only: fire. Liren trembled as he opened it. The letters within shimmered faintly, shifting like embers in the dark. It was no ordinary script, but alive with something that moved beneath the ink. He read, and as he read, the world changed. The words spoke of Orwyn the Faithless, of Emberwing the Golden, of Alaric Fireborn and the hidden city of Arion. They spoke of knowledge buried by fear, of the Master's long war against magic, and of a truth older than Valyria itself, that fire was not the enemy of man, but the mirror of his soul. By the time he looked up, the candles had burned low, and the first light of dawn shone through the high window. His heart beat fast with wonder and terror. If the book was real, and he could not doubt that it was, then all of history was a lie. The dragons had not died by chance, but by the will of the citadel itself. He spent the next month in secret, transcribing what he could and hiding the pages within hollow walls. But secrets, like embers, cannot be buried long without smoke. One morning, he woke to find his door unlatched. His notes were gone. That evening, he was summoned before the conclave. 12 archmasters sat in judgment, their faces shrouded by shadow. Renard was long dead, but his legacy lived on in men who bore his cold conviction. "Maester Liren," said the eldest, his voice soft and heavy as ash, "you have tampered with that which was sealed. You have read what was forbidden." Liren bowed his head, though fear clawed at his throat. "Knowledge is not sin," he said quietly. "You swore oaths to truth. If we are to serve the realm, we must see it clearly. Why did we hide what Orwyn wrote? Why erase the dragons from our memory?" The silence that followed was thick as smoke. Then another Archmaster spoke, his tone colder than the rest. "Because dragons bring ruin. Because fire breeds kings who believe themselves gods. Because every age of flame ends in blood." Liren met their eyes. "And what has your silence brought? Decay, cowardice, a world of chains." The eldest rose, his gray robes whispering across the floor. "Then you will die with your heresies." That night, they dragged him from his cell to the quays below the high tower. The sea was dark, the wind sharp. A small fire burned upon the stones, his last comfort and his pyre both. But before they could strike him down, a sound split the air, a roar. It came from far above, deep and terrible, echoing through the fog. The torches guttered, the sea shuddered, and in that instant, the fire on the stones leapt high as a tower. The Maesters scattered, crying out, but Liren stood unmoving, his eyes fixed upon the sky. There, beyond the clouds, a shadow wheeled, a vast shape, wings like banners of flame. The oldest of the Archmasters fell to his knees. "It cannot be," he whispered. "They are gone, gone forever." But the truth was there before them, undeniable. The dragon descended only for a moment, its body half hidden in mist, its scales glimmering pale gold in the firelight. Its roar rolled across the bay and broke upon the walls of Old Town like thunder. Then, as swiftly as it had come, it rose again and vanished into the dawn. Liren laughed, a sound of disbelief and triumph. "You see?" he cried. "Fire remembers." He turned to face his judges, but they were gone, fled into the dark. The flames died, the wind fell still, and only the sea remained to answer. By morning, Meister Liren had vanished. Some said the citadel imprisoned him, others that he drowned himself in the harbor. But the truth was whispered in taverns and alleyways for generations, that he had ridden east upon the wings of a dragon. In the years that followed, strange signs stirred again across the realm. Fishermen glimpsed lights moving beneath the waves, bright as molten gold. Shepherds near the stormlands found the earth scorched in perfect circles. A child was born in the reach, with eyes the color of amber and skin that did not burn. The Maesters called it madness, superstition. But behind their walls, they barred their windows and prayed to cold gods that they no longer believed in. For they knew what the rest of the world refused to see. Fire had returned to Westeros. Not the fire of kings or conquerors, but the living flame that had been buried since the age of Orwyn. And this time, it would not die quietly. Far to the east, in the ruined city of Orion, a single candle burned in the darkness of a shattered hall. Upon the wall, carved deep into stone, were the words that had survived every purge, every lie, every silence. So long as one spark endures, the flame will rise again. And beyond the sea, unseen but felt in every trembling dawn, wings of gold and black cut through the clouds, heralding a new age that no Maester could erase. The Maesters of Old Town swore thereafter that the night the dragon returned was the beginning of madness. Ships refused the harbor for fear the creature still lurked beneath the waves. Bells tolled without cause, and smoke rose from the high tower's uppermost spire, where lightning struck and lingered, burning blue until dawn. For the first time in living memory, the citadel closed its gates, yet not all within trembled. Some, those few whose hearts had not been scoured hollow by doctrine, felt a stirring, an old thrill, half fear, half longing. They whispered the forbidden name, Emberwing. Archmaester Roderick, eldest of the Grey, did not sleep that night. He wandered the vaults where books had burned in centuries past, and came at last to the cell once sealed for Liren. Its door hung open. Inside, the walls were scorched, but upon the stone someone had scratched with a charred nail 3 words that glowed faintly in the dark. Fire remembers all. Roderick stood long before them, his candle guttering. When he turned away, he made a choice that would end his life and shatter the citadel's silence forever. By dawn, ravens rose from Old Town, bearing messages wrapped in wax the color of flame. They flew to every great house, every port and city, crying a single warning: the dragons live. The conclave's fury was swift. They dragged Roderick before the council and stripped his chain link by link. "You betray knowledge with folly," they said. "You rouse old ghosts to ruin." He smiled through the blows. "Ghosts burn brighter than the living," he answered. And when they cast him from the tower, his last words carried on the wind: "The world is waking." And so it was. In King's Landing, where Eris's bones had long since turned to dust, rumors reached the Red Keep of a golden shadow seen at sunset above the sea. Small folk claimed the skulls in the throne room wept fire. The king's maester scoffed, but soldiers found the stones warm beneath their hands, and at night a hum like distant thunder shook the walls. Across the reach, a shepherd stumbled upon a valley blackened to glass. In its center lay a single scale the size of a man's hand, glimmering like polished gold. Lords quarreled to own it, septons called it a blasphemy, and poets swore it was a sign. The realm stirred with unease, as if some slumbering beast turned in its dreams. And far to the east, beyond rivers of red sand, a figure stood upon a tower of obsidian, gazing west. His hair shone pale in the sun, his eyes gold as dawn. Upon his shoulder perched a small creature, scarcely larger than a hawk, its scales black shot through with silver fire. Alaric Fireborn had been thought a myth, yet the blood of his line endured. Lyron's heirs had survived among the tribes of the desert, keeping his writings hidden, his language alive. Now one of them had risen who could read the runes of the old book, the book of the unquenched flame. He was called Cale Orwyn, though none living remembered why that name struck the Maesters with dread. To his people, he was the speaker, the one chosen by the fire itself. Each night he read from the black tome, and each night the flame grew stronger. From the molten river below the city of Orion, 4 shadows lifted their heads: Vara, Nyrax, Saren, and the last of Emberwing's brood, born from fire, unquenched. Their wings beat storms into the sky, the earth trembled, and from the ashes of Orion men gathered, outcasts, wanderers, priests of flame. They forged banners of gold and red and took the same vow Orwyn had whispered centuries before: "Let the fire wake." The call went forth across the world. Caravans vanished into the desert and returned with eyes alight and brands upon their skin. Septs burned in the night. Temples rose anew, their altars molten and bright. The world that had forgotten began unwillingly to remember. The Maesters answered as they always had, with fear. Archmeister Renard's successors called the conclave into secrecy, declaring that any man found speaking of dragons would be cast out, his chain broken. Ravens flew again, not with warning, but with orders, to smother every spark. Yet sparks, once scattered, cannot be gathered back. In Bravos, a red priest stood upon the steps of the Iron Bank and declared that R'hllor's children had taken wing. In Volantis, the black wall glowed faintly at night. In Dorne, a shepherd girl was said to walk unharmed through flame. And in the citadel's deepest vault, a single apprentice, barely a man, opened a hidden drawer in the library floor. There, he found a piece of glass, smooth and dark, etched with Valyrian runes. As he traced them, they flared red, and a whisper filled his mind. Fire remembers. The next morning, Old Town awoke to smoke. The Hightower's uppermost lantern, which had burned steady for 1,000 years, blazed suddenly with light so bright it was seen from the arbor. Some said lightning struck it. Others swore they saw wings. By the time the flames died, the top of the tower was gone. The sea below steamed like a cauldron, and where the ashes settled, a single feather of gold lay upon the stones. That night, the stars were hidden. A wind from the east carried the scent of salt and smoke. Sailors in the harbor looked up and saw 5 shapes moving through the clouds, vast and slow, their outlines gleaming with red fire. The eldest among them, sailors of 100 storms, fell to their knees. "The dragons have come again," they whispered. In the citadel, no bell rang, no horn sounded. The Maesters did not pray, for they had no gods. They only listened as thunder rolled across the sky and knew that the world they had built upon silence was ending. The next morning, the apprentices found the great doors of the citadel scorched black. Upon them, carved deep into the stone, was a single mark, the Valyrian rune for flame, and beneath it, 3 words written in blood and soot: "The fire wakes." Far to the east, the dragons turned westward at last. Cale Orwyn stood upon the walls of Arion, the black tome in his hands, and watched the dawn blaze crimson upon the sea. Behind him, the children of fire gathered in their thousands, their eyes shining with the reflection of wings. "Once," he said, his voice carrying like a bell, "men feared the dark and built chains to bind it, but the dawn was never meant to serve the night." Above, the dragons roared as one, and the sun rose like a burning crown. The fire that Orwyn had kindled, that Alaric had carried, that Lirin had awakened, now burned unchained across the world. And though kingdoms would fall and rise again, though time itself would grind to dust all memory of names, one truth endured in every age: fire remembers.